You can wake up tomorrow morning in 1847. Not a colonial Williamsburg reenactment. Not a BBC period drama with fake accents. Real Britons are paying real council tax to exist in villages where cars are physically impossible. Feudal lords outlived democracy, and your Amazon delivery arrives via donkey. One heritage committee bans the color yellow on internet cable for breaking the medieval vibe. Another village remained under actual feudal rule until George W. Bush was already on his second term. And there's a cliffside community so vertical that furniture comes through your roof with a rope winch while 6 men carry your groceries up a gradient that requires mountaineering equipment. While you're sitting in gridlock traffic doom-scrolling TikTok, these 12 places are quietly existing in a parallel dimension where the permanent year is 1,800, complete with the beauty, the brutality, and the bureaucratic nightmares nobody mentions in the travel brochures. Like this video if you've ever fantasized about escaping modern life, but do not click away, because by the end, you're either going to be browsing Rightmove for a thatched cottage with no plumbing, or you're going to kiss your Wi-Fi router and never complain about traffic again. Let's break it down. Number 1. Clovelly, Devon. In Clovelly, you can buy a seaside cottage for £425,000, but you'll need thighs of steel just to bring home a pint of milk. Clovelly, Devon. Population 443 and dropping, probably because everyone over 60 realized climbing vertical cobblestones with arthritis is poor planning. Tucked into a North Devon cliff, it looks like a Thomas Kincaid painting had a baby with a stairmaster. Painfully picturesque, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor. But here's the kicker, the permanent year is 1847, and not in a cute way. Let's break it down. Median home price, £425,000, roughly what you'd pay for a parking space in London, except here you get 0 square footage for a driveway. Cost of living runs 18% above the national average because tourists pay £6 for sandwiches while locals carry them uphill. Crime is basically zero because good luck making a getaway when you're winded after 12 steps. And here's a unique stat. Everything moves via donkey or wooden sled because cars have been banned since your great-grandfather was in diapers. But here's what nobody tells you. Medical emergencies require 6 men hauling you up a 400-foot vertical ascent on a chair for 45 minutes in the rain. Tourists photograph your bedroom windows daily because privacy is a 21st century concept. And if you forget the milk, that's a 30-minute cardio session back to your kitchen. As one Redditor put it, moved here for the peace. Didn't realize peace meant hauling my weekly shop up a gradient that requires mountaineering equipment. My Fitbit thinks I'm training for Everest. So what's the trade-off? You get Instagram harbor views and smug eco points, but you also get the distinct possibility of dying from appendicitis because the ambulance is basically villages with a stretcher and hope. And don't even get me started on parking. Oh wait, there isn't any. You pay £15 at the cliff top like a tourist, then lug groceries down what is essentially a vertical cobblestone waterslide. I've seen donkeys with better commuting options. At least they get fed at the end of the journey. You're just sweaty and angry with a bag of Crushed Crisps. Picture this. It's 6 a.m. The mist is rolling off the Bristol Channel. Seagulls are screaming about capitalism, and you're hauling Tesco bags up a 1-in-4 gradient while a donkey named Jeremy judges your choice of gluten-free bread. You stop to catch your breath, look out at the fishing boats, and think, this is romantic. Then you realize you forgot toilet paper and have to choose between dignity and cardiac arrest. Number 2. Kouros, Fife. Kouros is a kind of town where you can buy a 17th century cottage for the price of a Glasgow studio flat. But you'll be navigating home by candlelight because streetlights are apparently too modern. Kouros, Scotland. Population 400 and holding steady, mostly because nobody can find the exit in the dark. Deep in Fife, practically neighbors with Edinburgh but spiritually stuck in 1700. On the surface, it's ochre-washed cottages with red Dutch roofs, perfectly preserved medieval streets, and the kind of aesthetic that makes Instagram filters obsolete. It's the birthplace of photography and the filming location for Outlander, which explains why everyone suddenly dresses like they're about to die of consumption. Let's break it down. Median home price, £235,000. That's less than a parking space in London, but here you get 400 years of character included. Cost of living sits 12% below the national average. Rent hovers between £650 and £950. Crime is virtually non-existent. The only assaults here are committed by cobblestones. And here's the kicker. It's the only village in Scotland with traditional red-tiled roofs, stolen from Dutch merchants in the 1500s because even back then, Scots were savvy shoppers. But here's what nobody tells you. Outlander filming means tourists knock on your front door asking to see Claire's surgery, which is actually your living room where you're trying to eat toast in peace. The cobblestones are ankle-breaking death traps from November through March. The local A&E knows every resident by name and injury date. And there's zero street lighting, pitch black at night, requiring actual lanterns or your phone flashlight, which feels deeply anachronistic. As one local posted, lived there during filming, woke up to find my garden full of men in kilts vaping. Surreal, beautiful, but surreal. So what's the trade-off? You get to live in a postcard for the price of a cupboard, but you also get to break your fibula walking to the pub in December. You'll save thousands on housing, but you'll spend your evenings explaining to American tourists that no, they cannot tour your bathroom because it isn't 1743. And don't even get me started on the weather. I swear, the rain in Fife doesn't fall. It travels horizontally with a personal vendetta against umbrellas. You could be standing perfectly still and somehow get soaked from 3 directions simultaneously. The wind comes straight off the North Sea with the enthusiasm of a disappointed parent. At least in Clovelly you could blame the vertical climb for being wet. Hey, the sky just hates you personally. Picture this. It's 4 p.m. in November, which is basically midnight in Scotland. You're navigating home through fog thick enough to spoon, carrying groceries while using your phone flashlight like a Victorian lantern. The red roofs glow orange in the gloom, a ghostly beautiful scene, until you step on a cobblestone that's been polished smooth by 400 years of boots and suddenly you're horizontal, staring at the stars you can't see because of the clouds. Hey, at least in Kouros, you can drive to your front door. Looking at you, Clovelly. And if you think having your living room mistaken for a TV hospital is annoying, wait till you see the village where the National Trust owns your curtains and has opinions about the color yellow. Subscribe before urgency trigger. What they'll miss. Example, subscribe before your coworker finds these towns first and brags about their $400 rent. Don't let that happen. Number 3. Lacock, Wiltshire. In Lacock, you can live where Harry Potter was filmed, but you'll need owl posts to get internet because fiber cables are too yellow for the 1830s aesthetic. Lacock, England. Population 1,200 and strictly controlled by the National Trust, which sound benevolent but functions like a polite dictatorship with clipboards. Deep in Wiltshire, drowning in Cotswold charm, it's aggressively preserved. Satellite dishes are considered architectural war crimes. On the surface, it's honey-colored stone, medieval abbey ruins, and the birthplace of photography where Fox Talbot invented the negative in 1835. It's gorgeous, historically significant, and wildly committed to the 1800s, even if that means no toilet signs when you're desperate. Let's break it down. Median home price, £575,000. That's a Harry Potter tax in action. Cost of living runs 25% above average because heritage isn't cheap. Rent starts at £1,200 if you can find a landlord who isn't a trust. Crime is negligible. The only theft is of your dignity when tourists try your door handles. And here's the kicker. Filming location for Harry Potter, Pride and Prejudice, and Downton Abbey, meaning your Tuesday telly is literally your neighbor's front garden. But here's what nobody tells you. The Heritage Committee approves your curtains. If they are too modern, you get a formal letter on heavy cream stationery. Tourists swarm your house because it's Godric's Hollow. They try the door while you're inside eating beans. And you cannot get fiber broadband because digging disturbs the medieval vibe, so you're stuck with internet slower than Victorian mail. As one resident put it, tried to install Wi-Fi. The conservation officer said the cable was too yellow. I said, it's just cable. He said, it's heritage. We are not friends. So what's the trade-off? You get a UNESCO-worthy postcard where Jane Austen feels contemporary, but you also get a committee voting on your window treatments. You'll have cinematic beauty, but you'll stream Netflix at a resolution that makes it look like a flipbook. And don't even get me started on the Wi-Fi. I swear, getting high-speed internet here is like teaching a Victorian ghost about TikTok. They look at fiber optics like laser weapons from the future. Too yellow. They say, as broadband as a color scheme. You could be remote working. But no, your connection is powered by carrier pigeon. At least in Kuros you could use your phone flashlight. Here, they probably banned the phone for being anachronistic. Picture this. It's a damp afternoon. You're in your grade II listed cottage, uploading a PDF. The bar moves so slowly you see individual pixels loading. Outside, tourists press against your window, photographing your authentic interior from the movies. You wave. They don't wave back because you're ruining the shot. The Wi-Fi cuts out. You look at the wall where cable could be, but isn't, because it's too yellow. Remember Kuros's vaping Highlanders? Lackhawk said, "Hold my tea," and banned electricity's cousin. Number 4. SARK. In SARK, you can live income tax-free under a feudal system that outlasted the iPhone by a full year. Yes, really, SARK, Channel Islands. Population 500. Basically a large family reunion where everyone owes rent to the seigneur. Floating between England and France, not in the EU, just existing in legal limbo where the permanent year is 1850. On the surface, it's car-free serenity, dark sky island status, and the kind of peace that makes meditation apps obsolete. It's tax-free, beautifully isolated, and wildly committed to the bit. Let's break it down. Median home price, £850,000 if you can find one. Supply is tighter than the island grip on the 19th century. Cost of living is 40% above average because milk arrives by boat with a nautical markup. Rent starts at £1,500 for the privilege of being trapped. Crime is non-existent. The last burglary was recorded in 1924, probably by someone who felt bad and returned the butter churn. And here's the kicker. It's the last feudal state in Europe, technically ruled by a seigneur until 2008, who still gets a cut of every property sale. But here's what nobody tells you. Medical emergency, it's helicopter or death. There's no hospital, and if the weather's rough, you're waiting for appendicitis to resolve itself naturally. The seigneur still exists. He changed the title to president but kept the weird property rights. And winter isolation is real. Boats get cancelled for weeks, leaving you trapped in a 3-mile radius with the same 500 people, including your ex-boss and that guy who talks about composting at parties. As one Redditor put it, got a teaching job there. Realize remote work meant if the weather's bad, you're trapped with your ex-boss for a month. Beautiful cliffs, though. So what's the trade-off? You get zero light pollution and zero income tax, but you also get the distinct possibility of needing emergency surgery performed by a veterinarian with a flashlight. And don't even get me started on the roads. I swear, calling them roads is generous. They are dirt tracks masquerading as infrastructure, navigated by tractors moving at the speed of continental drift. You want to go somewhere? You walk, bike, or hitch a ride on a trailer pulled by a farmer named Jeff. At least in Lackhawk, they are cobblestones. Here, you have paths that turn into mud soup the moment it drizzles. Picture this. It's February. A storm has canceled the boat for 5 days straight. You're standing on a cliff edge, staring at the English Channel, smelling salt and mud, hearing nothing but wind because there are no cars to create white noise. It's breathtakingly beautiful, dark sky perfection, until you realize you're stuck in a 3-mile bubble with the same 500 people, and the pub just ran out of beer because the tractor couldn't make the delivery. Hey, at least in Lackhawk the committee only controlled your curtains. Hey, the guy still gets percentage of your house sale. Number 5. Crovey, Aberdeenshire. Crovey isn't a village. It's a single row of houses attached to a cliff with such commitment that if you drive here, you've already failed the entrance exam. Crovey, Scotland. Population 50, and dropping because the average age is roughly fossil. Clinging to the North Sea coast in Aberdeenshire, it was built in the 1800s for fishermen who apparently hated flat ground. On the surface, it's a tight line of cottages suspended between cliff and ocean, absurdly photogenic, and the kind of place where your front garden is literally the North Sea. It's narrow, ancient, and wildly committed to the bit, so committed that infrastructure is just a suggestion. Let's break it down. Median home price, £195,000. That's less than a garage in Edinburgh. Cost of living sits 20% below the national average. Rent hovers between £550 and £750. Crime is non-existent, not because everyone's saintly, but because there's literally nowhere to run. you'd hit a wall or the ocean. And here's the kicker. It's officially the narrowest village street in the UK, a single-file terrace where turning a car around is physically impossible. But here's what nobody tells you. You park 2 miles away and carry everything in by hand because the lane is too narrow for vehicles. Storm waves literally splash your front door. High tide can trap you inside your own house. And the village shop closed in 1987. So if you need a pint of milk, you drive 20 minutes to Macduff. As one Redditor put it, visited in February. Felt like The Shining but with seagulls. No phone signal. Beautiful though. 8 tenths would survive there. So what's the trade-off? You get a North Sea view for the price of a used BMW, but you also get the distinct possibility of being flooded in your living room while seagulls judge your life choices from the windowsill. And don't even get me started on the weather. I swear, the North Sea doesn't just storm, it assaults. Horizontal rain that finds gaps in your clothing you didn't know existed. Wind that screams like it's personally offended by your existence. It's like Jack Nicholson is outside with an axe, but instead of "Here's Johnny," it's just screeching gulls and the eternal question of whether your roof will still be attached come morning. Picture this. It's February, 4 p.m., already dark because Scotland. You're in a single row of houses, the waves are crashing against your front step, and the tide is coming in fast. You smell salt, seaweed, and the distinct anxiety of being trapped between a cliff and an angry ocean. Your neighbor, who is 80 and hasn't left since Thatcher, waves from 3 feet away because that's the entire street. Then the power flickers. Number 6, Bibury, Gloucestershire. Bibury is the most photographed street in England, which means 10,000 people a day stand outside your bedroom window while you're trying to get dressed. Bibury, Cotswolds. Population 600, but that number swells as sardine can every summer thanks to the second homeowners who visit twice a year to feel rustic. Deep in Gloucestershire, it's aggressively chocolate box, all honey-coloured stone in Arlington Row. The 1380 wool store now selling for £800,000 because it looks good on a postcard. On the surface, it's the prettiest village in England, a title that locals hate with the fire of 1,000 suns. Let's break it down. Median home price, £675,000. That's a Harry Potter tax meets Instagram inflation. Cost of living runs 30% above average because Cotswolds. Rent starts at £1,200 if you can beat the Londoners. Crime is low, but trespass is high. Tourists enter your garden thinking it's a National Trust exhibit. And here's the kicker. Arlington Row was built in 1380 to store wool. Now it costs nearly £1 million to live in a former barn. But here's what nobody tells you. Tourists try to open your front door because they think it's a museum. Instagrammers arrive at 5 a.m. for a golden hour, so sleep is impossible from May through September. And the locals actively despise the prettiest village title because it brings busloads of people who litter, as one resident put it. Living in Arlington Row is like being an animal at the zoo, except the animals are Japanese tourists with cameras costing more than my car. So what's the trade-off? You get a cottage older than America, but you also get zero privacy and a sleep schedule destroyed by people trying to get the perfect filter. And don't even get me started on the parking. I swear, the tour buses arrive like an invasion force at 8 a.m. sharp, discharging hundreds of people who all need to use a bathroom and think your driveway is a viewing platform. You'll save money on gym memberships from dodging pedestrians, but you'll spend your mornings explaining that no, this is not the public toilet. And yes, you actually live here. Picture this. It's 5 a.m. The mist is perfect. The light is golden, and you're in your pajamas making coffee. Suddenly, a camera lens appears inches from your window. A photographer from Tokyo is crouching in your herb garden. You wave. They don't wave back because you're ruining the shot. The bus engines start. The hordes descend. At least in Crovey, the seagulls were honest about their hostility. So real talk. Would you trade your privacy for this kind of beauty? Drop a yes or nope in the comments. And if you made it this far without Googling how to install blackout curtains, hit that like button so the algorithm knows you're one of the smart ones who likes geography torture. And if you think having your bedroom window mistaken for a museum exhibit is invasive, wait till you see the town where the streets are so vertical that furniture comes in through the roof. Hit subscribe so next time you're trapped between high tide and a cobblestone hill, you'll at least know if the village has a pub. Emergency preparedness is knowing your escape routes. Number 7. Staves, North Yorkshire. In Stays, you can buy a seaside cottage for £210,000, but you'll need a rope winch and 6 mates just to get your IKEA wardrobe through the roof. Stays, North Yorkshire. Population 500 and dropping faster than gravity, mostly because anyone under 30 realizes you can't build a career on selling ice cream to wheezing hikers. Clinging to the North Sea coast, it looks like a charming fishing village where Captain Cook once worked as a teen. On the surface, it's quaint harbors, art galleries, and wild coastal walks. It's historic, vertical, and wildly committed to making you suffer for the view. Let's break it down. Median home price, £210,000. That's less than a used Range Rover in London. Rent around £700 a month. Cost of living is 10% below national average. Crime is basically non-existent. And here's the kicker, an 80% gradient on the main thoroughfare. Captain Cook trained here as a teenager, presumably by hauling fish up a cliff face for fun. But here's what nobody tells you. No vehicle access to 80% of houses. Everything moves by hand barrow or rope winch through the roof. The infrastructure is literally Victorian. Pipes burst, sewage is questionable, and maintenance means hauling materials up that gradient. And young people are evacuating because the only job is seasonal tourism. As one Redditor put it, moved here for the quaint factor. My Amazon driver looked at the hill, said, nah, and drove away. Never saw the package. Live here long enough and you develop quads like oak trees. So what's the trade-off? You get North Sea views for the price of a parking fine in Kensington, but you also get a lifestyle that requires the upper body strength of a sailor. You'll save money, but you'll spend your weekends winching groceries up a cliff. And don't even get me started on the roads. I swear, calling them roads is an insult to flat surfaces everywhere. These are cobblestone death traps angled at a gradient that would make a mountain goat dizzy. You try to walk down with shopping bags, and suddenly you're sprinting, arms windmilling, praying to whatever god looks after ankles. At least in Bibury, the ground was level. Here, it's actively trying to kill you via potential energy. Picture this. It's moving day. You're standing at the bottom of the hill watching your new sofa dangling from a rope winch, spinning slowly in the North Sea wind. You smell salt and sweat. You hear seagulls laughing at you. Your mate is at the top, grunting, while you guide an 800-pound corner unit up a cliff face. Then a tourist asks if this is part of the local charm. Hey, at least in Bibury the tourists stayed on the street. Hey, they're watching you humiliate yourself with furniture. Number 8. Rye, East Sussex. Rye is a kind of town where you can drink a 6-pound cappuccino in a 12th century pub while watching a grown man weep because his insurance won't cover another cracked axle. Rye, East Sussex. Population 4,500, which sounds substantial until winter arrives and you realize everyone is actually in London. Perched on the East Sussex coast, it's aggressively haunted-looking, cobbled streets, medieval church, and the Mermaid Inn built in 1156 with actual smuggler tunnels still in use during the 1800s. On the surface, it's ghost tours, vintage bookshops, and the kind of aesthetic that makes you want to wear a cloak unironically. It's historically significant, artist-heavy, and wildly committed to looking like a horror movie set with artisanal pricing. Let's break it down. Median home price, £465,000. That's steep for East Sussex. Rent hovers around £1,150. Cost of living runs 20% above average because historical is apparently a tax. Crime is low but weird, mostly artists having existential crises and drunks arguing about poetry. And here's the kicker. Insurance claims here are 300% of the national average, entirely because those picturesque cobblestones are ankle-breaking, suspension-destroying death traps. But here's what nobody tells you. Tourist trap pricing means £6 for a cappuccino because it's atmospheric. The cobblestones destroy cars and ligaments with equal enthusiasm. Local mechanics send their kids to University of Rye's axle replacement economy. And behind the Tudor facades, it's surprisingly modern, which breaks the illusion and makes the whole place feel like a theme park where the staff forgot to wear costumes. As one Redditor put it, Rye is beautiful until you try to move a sofa up Mermaid Street. I saw a grown man weep. The cobbles won. So what's the trade-off? You get smuggler history and ghostly vibes, but you also get a chiropractor bill and the creeping realization you're paying premium prices to live in a museum diorama with Wi-Fi. And don't even get me started on the parking. I swear, the lanes in Rye were designed for pack horses, not Hyundai i30s. You'll attempt to navigate Mermaid Street, which is basically a cobbled staircase masquerading as infrastructure, and suddenly you're playing automotive Jenga with stone walls built before the Magna Carta. Your suspension will cry. Your ankles will cry. You will pay £6 for that cappuccino just to calm your nerves after scraping your side mirrors off for the third time. Picture this. It's evening, fog rolling in from the Romney marshes. You're walking past a mermaid inn, smelling wood smoke and hearing tales of smugglers moving contraband through secret tunnels. It's perfectly creepy, beautifully atmospheric, romantic even, until you have to carry groceries up Mermaid Street and realize the 12th century didn't account for modern Nees or Tesco delivery vans. At least in Stays they had the decency to use winches. Hey, you just suffer on foot while paying tourist prices. Number 9. Haworth, West Yorkshire. The Bronte sisters wrote about the moles because they were literally trapped here by mud, wind, and the sheer logistical nightmare of leaving. Haworth, West Yorkshire. Population 6,000, which sounds healthy until you realize most are either literary tourists or people who really, really like bonnets. Deep in Bronte country, practically drowning in atmospheric moorland, it's the kind of place where the weather's a character in a novel, and not a nice one. On the surface, it's a preserved main street, the Heritage Steam Railway, and the parsonage where Emily wrote Wuthering Heights. It's Gothic, literary, and wildly committed to looking like 1847 even if that means your car commits suicide on the hill. Let's break it down. Median home price, £285,000. That's surprisingly reasonable, your northern advantage in action. Rent around £800 a month. Cost of living sits 15% below the national average. Crime is low because even criminals don't want to climb that hill in the rain. And here's a kicker. The Heritage Railway still runs actual steam trains, and the main street is preserved so aggressively that it looks like the 1940s never happened, let alone the 2020s. But here's what nobody tells you. Tourists in period costume descend every weekend. Bonnets everywhere. Top hats. People pretending to be consumptive. It's deeply annoying. The cobbled hill is brutal. Cars burn out clutches trying to descend, and the descent feels like controlled fall. And the weather is literally Wuthering Heights. Constant 40 miles per hour wind, horizontal rain, and trees that give up trying to grow because a moor just slaps them down. As one driver posted, tried to drive down Main Street. My clutch burned out and a woman in a bonnet laughed at me. Felt historically accurate. So what's the trade-off? You get to live in a literary masterpiece for the price of a studio flat in Manchester, but you also get weather that wants to flay you alive and tourists who cosplay tuberculosis on your doorstep. And don't even get me started on the weather. I swear, the wind in Haworth doesn't just blow. It assaults you with quotations from Emily Bronte while trying to remove your roof tiles. It's 40 miles per hour minimum, usually horizontal, carrying rain that somehow travels uphill. You'll walk out looking like a romantic poet and return looking like you've been through a car wash backwards. At least in Rye you had fog. Hey, you have meteorological violence disguised as atmospheric. Picture this. It's a Sunday afternoon. You're walking down Main Street, dodging tourists in Victorian bonnets who are Instagramming the apothecary. The steam train whistles in the distance. It feels romantic, Gothic, literary, until you realize your hair is being ripped from your scalp by a moorland wind that sounds like Catherine Earnshaw's Go Screaming for Heathcliff. At least in Rye the cobbles were the only thing attacking you. Hey, the sky itself is the enemy. Number 10. Solva, Pembrokeshire. In Solva, the main street has a 1 in 4 gradient, which means the postman needs climbing gear and the seagulls are braver than the tourists. Solva, Wales. Population 900, which swells to standing room only in August when the English descend looking for authentic coastal charm. Deep in Pembrokeshire, drowning in Welsh language signage that will humble your Duolingo streak, it's a harbour village built for lime export in the 1800s, back when boats were easier than roads. On the surface, it's a natural harbour, colourful cottages climbing the hillside like they're trying to escape the tide, and the kind of quaint that makes you want to buy a boat you can't sail. It's steep, it's Welsh, and it's wildly committed to making your cars burn. Let's break it down. Median home price, £340,000. That coastal Wales premium in action. Rent hovers around £850. Cost of living sits 10% below the national average, which is the Welsh advantage. Crime is virtually non-existent. The only violence here is a gradient. And here's a kicker. The harbor was built for industrial lime shipping in the 1800s, but now it's only used by pleasure boats and the occasional fisherman who enjoys vertical cardio. But here's what nobody tells you. You park at the bottom and live at the top, which means carrying groceries is essentially CrossFit with bags of frozen peas. High tide flood the lower village, so you can literally be trapped between water and hill with no escape route. And Welsh language dominance is real. English-only retirees struggle with local bureaucracy because the council sends letters in Cymric and expects you to keep up. As one Redditor put it, "Thought I was fit until I tried to carry shopping bags up High Street. Needed oxygen. The view was nice, though." So what's the trade-off? You get a postcard harbor for less than a London parking space, but you also get thighs that could crush walnuts and the distinct possibility of being flooded in your kitchen while trying to pronounce Landfape. And don't even get me started on the roads. I swear, the gradient in Solva isn't a street. It's a wall with delusions of pavement. You start walking up with a backpack and suddenly you're using your hands, channeling your inner mountain goat, wondering if you should have brought ropes and carabiners. Your car sits at the bottom, weeping, because it knows it will never make it to your front door. At least in Haworth, you could burn out your clutch. Here, you need actual climbing equipment to get your Tesco delivery from the curb to your kitchen. Picture this. It's high tide. The water is lapping at the bottom of the village, cutting off your escape route. You're standing halfway up the 1 in 4 gradient, clutching a bag of groceries, lungs burning, while a seagull the size of a toddler watches you struggle with what can only be described as contempt. The harbor looks stunning in the sunset, all golden and peaceful, except you're trapped between the Atlantic Ocean and a hill that feels like Everest with better real estate. Number 11, Mousel, Cornwall, pronounced Mosul. This village is so Cornish that the fishermen still speak in a dialect Shakespeare would recognize, and the parking situation is legally considered a hate crime. Mousel, Cornwall. Population 600, though that number swells to 2,000 in August when the second homeowners arrive to get away from it all, which apparently means buying up all the houses locals can't afford. Tucked into Mounts Bay in West Cornwall, it's a postcard-perfect fishing harbor with tiny winding streets, traditional festivals, and a name that tourists butcher daily. It's ancient, it's isolated, and it's wildly committed to being Cornish, even if that means having no surf protection and a winter population that could fit in a pub. Let's break it down. Median home price, £425,000, which is holiday home inflation at its finest. Average rent around £950. Cost of living runs 20% above the national average because everything has to be driven down that narrow peninsula. Crime is low. The only crime here is a pronunciation. And here's a kicker. 60% of properties are second homes, meaning in January it's essentially a ghost town with nicer gardens, and they still celebrate Tom Bulcock's Eve, a festival where they eat fish pies and remember a guy who saved a village from starvation in the 1600s. But here's what nobody tells you. Second homeowners have priced out actual locals so aggressively that the village is deserted in winter, just empty houses and seagulls. The harbor has zero surf protection, so Atlantic storms batter the village, cutting off power and making you question your life choices. And tourists constantly mispronounce it as mouse hole, 2 words, while locals visibly flinch like you just insulted their grandmother. As one local posted, winter in Mousel is either magical or terrifying, depending on whether the one shop is open. Also, it's not pronounced mouse hole. Stop saying mouse hole. So what's the trade-off? You get a harbor that looks like it was painted by a pre-Raphaelite for the price of a small castle, but you also get the distinct possibility of being trapped by a storm surge while surrounded by empty holiday homes owned by people in London. You will have traditional festivals, but you will also have traditional isolation and the slow death of actual community. And don't even get me started on the food situation. I swear, in August you've got 15 places selling artisanal seafood at prices that would make a Londoner wince, all claiming to be authentic while playing jazz fusion. But come January, the village shop has a potato and some hope. The bakery is closed until Easter. You want a latte in February? You'll get instant coffee from the one place that's open, served with a side of "Who do you think you are?" coming here in winter. Picture this. It's mid-January. The storm is raging, waves crashing over the harbor wall, power lines down. You're walking through narrow lanes lined with darkened windows. 60% of them are empty because the owners are in Fulham. You smell salt and ozone and wet stone. You hear the wind howling and maybe, if you're lucky, the generator from the one pub that's brave enough to stay open. It's beautiful, it's bleak, it's bittersweet, and you're not sure if you're in a Cornish dream or a very wet ghost story. At least in Solva you had Welsh bureaucracy to keep you company. Here, you just have empty houses and the sound of your own teeth chattering. But we end where we began, in Devon, at a place where the blacksmith is still making horseshoes because he literally doesn't know what year it is. Number 12, Cockington, Devon. We end where we began, in Devon, at a place where the blacksmith is still making horseshoes because he genuinely doesn't know what year it is, and the thatched roofs cost £20,000 to insure. Cockington, Devon. Population 1,000, all of whom apparently signed a contract to live inside a museum diorama. Just outside Torquay in South Devon, it's aggressively preserved. No modern housing estates allowed. Working forge continuously operating since the 1500s and thatched cottages everywhere. On the surface, it's rose gardens, a manor house, carriage rides, and the kind of chocolate box England that makes Americans weep into their passports. It's functional, it's ancient, and it's wildly committed to the bit. So committed that reality feels optional here. Let's break it down. Median home price, £365,000. Rent around £900 a month. Cost of living runs 15% above average because Torbay tourist tax applies even to essentials. Crime is low. The only violations here are against modernity. And here's the kicker. The forge has been continuously operating since the 1500s. Same family, same anvil, same refusal to acknowledge that Netflix exists. But here's what nobody tells you. You are essentially living in a heritage experience, which means locals often feel like theme park staff being watched by visitors in rental cars. There's no supermarket or petrol station. You drive to Torquay for basics, which is a harsh reality check after your thatched fantasy. And those thatched roofs? They require £20,000 rethatching every 15 years, and good luck getting that insured without selling a kidney. As one Redditor put it, moved here thinking it was quaint. Realized I live in a museum diorama. My neighbor is a man in a smock who makes candlesticks. I love it, but I also haven't seen a doctor in 3 years. So what's the trade-off? You get a working forge and rose gardens older than your country, but you also get the existential crisis of wondering if you're a resident or an exhibit. You'll have history, but you also have to drive 20 minutes for milk while dodging horse-drawn carriages full of tourists taking photos of your front door. And don't even get me started on the coffee. I swear, the cafes here sell artisanal hot chocolate for £4.50 that tastes like they melted a candle into some warm milk. There's no Costa, no Starbucks, just places with names like the Oldie Forge Tea Room where the Wi-Fi password is probably God Save a Queen 1837. You'll sip your overpriced brew while sitting next to a gift shop selling wooden ducks, wondering if you've actually died, and this is some kind of purgatory where your punishment is eternal craft fairs and the smell of wet thatch. Picture this. It's a misty morning. You're walking past a forge, hearing the actual clang-clang of a blacksmith making actual horseshoes, not for tourists, but because someone's actual horse needs them. You smell wood smoke and roses and horse manure from the carriage rides. It's romantic, peaceful, timeless, until you realize you need ibuprofen and the nearest pharmacy is a 20-minute drive through Torbay traffic, past the neon lights of actual civilization. Hey, at least in Clovelly we started with donkeys and vertical cliffs. Here in Cockington, we've come full circle to Devon again. Except this time the animals are horses, the hills are flat, and the biggest danger is dying of old age while waiting for your artisanal coffee. So that's 12 places where time stopped in the 1800s. Some will break your ankles, some will break your wallet, and some will just break your spirit with horizontal rain. But hey, at least you'd have killer cars and a great story.